Code and also the Criminal Code.
Yeah.
Could we say that the VAP Act is an improvement of these codes because they have different definition? For instance, the rape you mentioned,
yeah,
they have different definition, and the VAP Act seems to be the only act that specifies that rape is not just peculiar to women.
Yes.
But men are involved.
Yes.
So what's your assessment of this act? You know, the implication, its coverage, you know, away from the penal and the criminal code.
Yes, like I said, it has a wider definition of what rape is. And you will agree with me that in the last few years, we've also seen boys also being abused. We've also seen violence against men. So the VAP Act or the VAP law, as you have it in states, maintains that balance to say, see, violence can be committed against any person, whether male or female, whether boys or girls. This law really gives that understanding to the whole scenario. And if you also look at the coverage, yes, not all states in Nigeria have passed the VAP Act, but I think you have about 16 or more states where the VAP Act has been domesticated.
18 states.
About yes,
total,
or thereabout. Okay, and the implication of that in those states is that boys or men that have been abused can also seek refuge and ensure that their rights are enforced under the Act. States that are yet to pass the law, unfortunately, may not give that opening for men and boys.
So if this is supposed to be an improvement on the penal and the criminal code, why are the states not adopting it?
Yes, I think it's a matter of advocacy. And I know that in the last 6 years, there has been strong advocacy across the country by several organizations to ensure that states pass this law. And if you look at all the 36 states across the Federation, you will see that the law is at one stage or the other. For instance, we have states where the State Houses of Assembly have passed the laws, but the governors of those states are yet to assent. In some of the State Houses of Assembly, the law is also at maybe the first reading or the second reading or the committee stage. But I can tell you that work is ongoing, and in no distant future, all the states across the Federation will pass that law. And one very peculiar thing you must note with this is that even states that were not interested in passing the Child Rights Act or in domesticating it are also doing so much in ensuring that the VAP Act is being passed into law. States like Sokoto State, like Kebbi State are already working on it, and the law is almost at the verge of being passed in those states.
Interesting. While I was doing some digging, I found out that some of the states have not passed it, and we have perpetrators of violence, perpetrators of rape. There are rape victims everywhere, and that is certain. I found out that there's a protection order. Of course, you have to explain that to us. There's a protection order that can be used in those kind of situations, maybe in states where this VAP Act has not been assented or promulgated. So how does that work?
Okay, I think it is simple. And what I need to explain first is that affidavit evidence for lawyers is one of the fastest procedures for getting court orders. And that is exactly what the VAP Act has provided for. That for any citizen who is afraid that he or she will suffer injustice, violence against him or her, can go to court. In fact, the law even says someone can go on behalf of that individual to court and then make an application before the court seeking that the court should grant the person a protection order. And if the court looks at the affidavit evidence and is satisfied, the court will go to issue an order of protection in favor of that particular individual. And what that means is that the person against whom that order is made, if the person goes on to carry out any action of violation against that individual, that person will be held to contempt, and that person may go to prison or face the wrath of the law. So it's just a way of the law being proactive, and it's also a way of also making it's very difficult for perpetrators or culprits to violate human rights of citizens.
You made mention of the person may go to prison. Does that mean that's applied to maybe sanctions for such kind of offenses? Because when you say may, it may happen that because this law has not been assented to in that state, it might be swept under the carpet. Is that the situation?
Yes, unfortunately, it's difficult for anybody to apply for this protection order in a state where the VAP Act is yet to be domesticated.
How difficult is it?
Yes, it's difficult because you do not have any law that supports it. But of course, some of our judges are judicial activists. And even though they know that there is no law that supports it, for some judges who are activists, they may still allow citizens in those states to still use this procedure. But again, it becomes very difficult, like I said, if you do not have a law that backs it. But it doesn't mean that in states where the VAP Act is yet to be domesticated, that citizens cannot approach the court and seek for protection order, because the court also has inherent jurisdiction that are not really supported by any law. Yes, and the courts are also interested in also protecting people's rights. So even if the VAP Act is not domesticated in those states, citizens can still get protective orders from courts.
So that brings me to the question, how important is the passage of this law in states?
It's very, very important. We know that Nigeria is a very big country, and the states are closer to the people than the federal. Yes, so if you have this law being passed in states, it brings it closer to the people. It also makes it easy to also create advocacy around the laws to make people understand the implication of the laws. You will also understand that states in Nigeria also have their peculiarities based on people's customs or people's religious views. And these views and these customs can also be accommodated within the law when it's domesticated. And that's why if you look at the General Act, the VAP Act, you will also see that it also prohibits customs that are detrimental. It also talks so much about not denying people rights to inheritance and so on and so forth, which we know are really issues that has to do with people's custom around the country. So each state has its own peculiarity and can always find a way of ensuring that those things that bothers it within the ambits of violence are properly addressed.
Okay, there's a lot of positivity surrounding the VAP Act, and there are concerns as well. When we have this domesticated, at some point you have the religious law, we have the customary law clashing with the VAP Act. So how do the state, or how would the state manage this when it comes to play?
Yes, and it's not for me a difficult thing, and most states can really do so much. By properly engaging traditional rulers when it comes to customs, and by properly engaging religious leaders also when it comes to religion.
Engaging them, you mean educating them about this act?
Yes, by highlighting the advantages of the act.
Okay.
And I believe any custom anywhere that is repugnant, any custom anywhere that does not have the good of the people at heart, is not a good custom and must be discarded. And every just principle must also have the good of the people embedded in it. And that's the essence of the whole VAP Act or the VAP laws. Yes, and that's the perspective that people must see it from. So if the legislature at the state level engage religious leaders and make them see what the advantages are for the adherents of the various religions we have, I do not think there's going to be any challenge. Yes.
So when we talk about acts like this, when we talk about the law in general, the citizens have a role to play. The states have their rules and the federal too have their rules, just like we pointed out earlier.
Yes.
So to the global citizens, what can we do to make this let's say, to make this, the states, rather, those states that have not signed it, assent to this bill? What's our responsibility?
Yes, our responsibility is to continue to speak about it and to continue to talk to our neighbors, our friends, to members of our families about the law. And those of us who are fortunate to have legislators very close to us, we must also put it to them that they have a duty to ensure that these laws are passed in all of the states. And because it's for our collective good, you never can tell. Perhaps there's somebody close to you that may suffer domestic violence or sexual assault or whatever kind of violence. It may even be violence perpetrated by state actors. So nobody can tell. Those of us who may not have experienced any kind of violence, there's no certainty that we may not find ourselves in that position tomorrow. But if the law is there to protect us all, we'll all be happy to say yes, even if there are certain people who want to violate our rights, the law will always be there to protect us. So it's a law for everybody, for the rich, for the poor, for the elites, for the masses, for the politicians, for those of us who are not politicians. It's a law that is out there to protect all of us, irrespective of our political parties, irrespective of our religious views, irrespective of our tribes.
All right, you're still watching Law and Order on Trust Television. We'll go for a break, but we'll be back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We are still on the show, Law and Order, and today we're discussing the VAP Act, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. And we're here with a legal practitioner. He's a human rights lawyer, a coordinator of Pro Bono Clearinghouse, Barrister. Okay, he said I shouldn't say barrister in the beginning, so it's going to be Mutiu Akinsoya Esquire. I hope I got that right now.
Very well, yes.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
So, about the Act, I'm sure there are sections in it. It's pages of laws contained in the Act.
Yes.
So, let's take a look at the Act. I'm not saying in-depthly, but let's just take a look at the Act.
Okay. Like I said earlier, there are about 26 offenses listed in the Act, in Part 1 of the Act. And some of the offenses are perhaps things that we ordinarily take for granted every day. One very important one is abandonment of spouse and children or dependents. You find situations where a man will decide to just abandon his wife and walk away for days, and then the wife is there abandoned with no means of livelihood. That is also violence. And if any man does that, the man can be charged under this act and can be convicted or can be asked to pay a fine. You also have instances where men or women will throw the things of their spouses out of the house. That's also an offense. These are things that we take for granted. You have men who will just wake up and just get the things of their wives and just throw it out of the house, and people come begging them. If any man does that, or if any woman does that, under the law now, it is an offense.
Wow.
Also, forced dependence, where you force another person to depend on other people for survival or for means of livelihood, it's also an offense. And an example here is where a father decides to abandon his wife and children, and then they are forced to go to the streets to beg. Any man who also does that has also committed an offense. And I must also mention Section 7 of the Act that provides for frustration of investigation. And that can happen in so many ways. Where you are aware that violence has been committed, whether domestic violence, whether sexual or gender-based violence, and you are aware and then you refuse to report. Maybe it's your child, maybe it's somebody who is dependent on you, who lives with you, and you refuse to report to the police or to the appropriate authority. That can also be an offense. Or where the matter was reported to the police, and while the police was investigating, you then go asking that the matter be resolved amicably, that's also an offense. Because we must understand that these offenses are offenses against the state. They're not offenses against individuals. And then it's only the state that can pardon or decide to say, oh, we will not proceed against the culprit. So the offenses against the state, and even the victim cannot decide to say, oh, I'm withdrawing my complaint, or I'm not interested in the offense anymore. So we must understand that the moment violence is committed against any person, it is not an offense that can be compounded. And what that means is that it's not an offense that can be settled out of court or an offense that can be settled at the police station, like the civil cases that we know where parties can come sit down and say, let's settle amicably.
So there's a lot concerning this act, and it will take us some time to go through them in depth.
Exactly.
But thank you so much for explaining the VAP Act to us, and I'm sure you've learned a thing or two. You have to stay with us as we will be discussing some of the provisions in the Act one by one. You can only get that on Law and Order. And that's how much we can take today, but we'll have to say thank you to Mutiu Akinsanya, Esquire, for being a part of the program. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's the program for today. Join us again next week for another edition of Law and Order. I am Martia Omar. Keep a date with us.
In 2001, when GSM came into Nigeria, accessibility of mobile phones were limited. Mobile call booths were available under trees, umbrellas for those who wanted to reach out to their families or loved ones. But now it has become a thing of the past. A similar idea has sprung up, targeting the banking sector, called the POS, point of sale. Does the POS have the potential of displacing banks or ATMs? Let's find out from the masses what they think about using POS and the accessibility of cash withdrawals.
Well, it all depends. When it's very convenient for me, I go to the bank. But when it's not convenient for me, POS is more convenient because you can have it everywhere. At the point, I was skeptical. Because of we have a lot of frauds going on these days. Yes, and I have seen people with bitter experience, using POS. But I think by and large, I think now, I think it's okay.
In our system currently, I think POS is more easier somehow. For example, POS cannot seize your card, so that is the advantage. And sometimes when you use your POS, you get paid instantly. But the only little disadvantage about POS is the decline in transaction, and most times it reverse back, just like normal ATM machine. But the disadvantage in ATM is that sometimes when it sees your bank, possibly weekend, or you're using another bank ATM, you cannot get your ATM card that same day back. They will refer you back to your bank, and you start, going through the process. There's a queue in the bank, but because in the society where we are right now, we need a quick cash in anything we're doing, since they said it's cashless society. So in any corner of finance, there's always POS. So it's better for me to use the POS where they will deduct their normal money.
When I started, although customer was afraid because they were thinking I was a fraud POS person. So the time came and they begin to patronize, and they now saw trust in it, and they start coming. And after that, I also faced a challenge of fraud people doing fake transfer. Normally, when we started, I normally receive transfer phone transfer, but then when I receive a fraud set of people, I stopped doing I stopped accepting a transfer, a phone transfer.
With the news about the Yahoo boys using it to scam and all that, yes, I've actually been scared, and I'm also still scared. Just that it's closer to my house, so I prefer using it, because there are some people that I actually trust. So I just make use of one particular person to withdraw.
Very fast, you can just go there, withdraw your money under 2 minutes and you're out. But for the bank, you have to waste time before you didn't reach your turn. You're not even sure if you reach your turn, there'll still be money at the ATM.
Challenges I faced when I started was the network issue and every other thing. People don't know what is called POS then. So a lot of challenges like debits, they will think that it's scams or every other thing. But thank God now, many of them have known the business.
I asked the POS users if they think the POS is taking over the bank.
No, they are not. They are not taking their customers. They still have their own customers. Why we POS agents, we still have our own customers?
We are working for the bank as well, so it's not taking the bank customers. As for me, now I'm first bank agents. You understand? So I'm still working for them.
I like one aspect of it because it has served as an empowerment to a lot of people, yes.
In a bid to find out if POS is being used for fraudulent activities, this is what they have to say.
Fake money, fake transaction, that is fake debit, credit transaction. So many. Someone said, they will just do fake transaction for you. You will see debited, but it's fake. You give them cash, they will go, you not see it. There are many risks. Some small customers, they will use small change, they will not bring it back.
I've been robbed, but nevertheless, I actually went to withdraw. In the process, they came to rob the girl that was with the POS, so all of us were victims.
Well, personally, I've not been defrauded because most times I do transfer a lot. So it's just occasionally I use my card. So, but the few times that I've used it, I'll first of all ask them if there's network. The only time POS will have issues when they have breakdown in network based on the network they are using. But ATM too is doing their job, but I think POS has taken over.
What are the processes or steps one has to take to get a POS? This is what one of the users of POS have to say.
First of all, when you order for the POS, then if the POS is available, you have it for like in 1 month's time or maybe 1 week time. Yes, but when it's not available, then it will take a longer time, like in 5 months, sometimes 3 months. There are some procedures you have to take, like they will send you a form to fill, to put your BVN account details and everything, and the business name, the name you want to use for the business, and your address and everything. You are buying the POS. So like this thing, the amount is 40,000 per one. 35,000 plus agent fee, like the aggregator. The agent that will bring the POS, you have to give him 5,000. So everything becomes 40,000 for everything. So after the process and everything, when the POS is ready, like when you make any transaction, like every transaction, they have their own charges they charge for every transaction you make every day. The risks are like, the way I'm sitting outside here now, some people might be passing and you don't know who they are. They might be looking at you saying this guy is using money. So like some places, that's why you see rob, like they rob some POS people in some areas that are bad. But like here, thank God, this is safe for me.
In a bid to find out more about the use of POS, its advantages and disadvantages, I had an interview with a software engineer. This is what he has to say.
One very good factor that I would hold on to would be ease of doing business. Everybody wants to get things done faster. because expectation has changed for every other person. So things need to be done faster, both transactions and every other thing that we do daily. Before now, the POS was developed mainly for the bank and banking operations, and then for very big businesses to have like a form of presence or a bank presence within the organization. But over time, I think a lot more organizations or a lot more sectors adopted it. And then in recent time, given to or as a result of the COVID incidents last year, discovered that given that the banks were shut down for a long period of time, as Nigerians as we are and as innovative as we are, we found another use case for the POS. Upward of 90% of fraud cases gets apprehended, given that for funds to move from one person, it ends up in another account. So we can easily track funds moving from account A to account B. But then in some rare cases, we'll find some people who are quite dubious. I've heard of cases where people impersonate others or get their cards and then make use of those cards to maybe buy one thing or the other online and then deliver it somewhere else where they just go to pick it up. So for such cases, which are rare, it becomes very difficult to track or apprehend the culprits. But beyond that, for cases where someone steals someone else's card or since you already has the PIN to someone else's card, maybe as a result of past transaction or the other, finds a way to maybe get the card and try to use it for transaction. Such cases are usually trackable because at the end, that person would want to, or the person will usually go to maybe another cash point to get cash. So you can always track that. Also, the cases of transfers from one account to another can always be tracked.
While digital technology and the use of mobile banking system have eased transactions for many, it has also come with its own challenges, as fraudsters and scammers are taking advantage of unsuspecting persons. Is there further need for people to be vigilant and beware of such scammers? Banks and financial institutions should also continue to create awareness on the use of POS and how to avoid being scammed.